Hello Rayclast, what's up? Zambash here, back after a long time with no videos, and I'm certainly not promising at this point that there will be lots of videos going forward, but I actually have had a lot of fun so far in Sanctum League, had a lot of firsts, and this is my starter build. This is a Impending Doom Poison Occultist, using some of the newly buffed curse technology that we got in this patch, and really leveraging Impending Doom as hard as I could. And I think it's turned out to be overall legitimately one of my best builds ever, and has achieved a lot of firsts for me this league. So in the background here, we just have a nice juicy pack size Underground Sea that I was doing some 40% Delirium on, and just trying to farm some Eldritch Embers and stuff for some currency. As you can see, the clear speed's pretty nice, we just blow up packs as we go. This build wasn't technically my starter. I started with some melee character trying a couple of the new skills and ended up not liking that, so I sort of restarted on day 3 and went into this character. The pros of this build: it has excellent clear speed and really nice single target in general, and it will honestly let you cruise through all the content in the game except for the Uber boss fights. The big con to this build, the sort of downside, the big defensive hole, is that like 90% of our damage mitigation defense comes from cursing enemies, and so our big weakness is ambient environmental effects that deal damage, because we can't curse anything to reduce the damage coming from those, and unfortunately all of the Uber fights are pretty much just full of ambient environmental damage that you can't mitigate through curses. So not a great build for the Ubers. I think a couple of them, like Shaper, would be doable if you were just really good at dodging stuff and doing the fights, but I tried a couple and failed and didn't feel like sinking any more time or money into that. The build is really cheap to get going. At this point, I don't know, I can't estimate the budget exactly. I would guess I've put something like 15 divs into it, but I was blasting through T16 maps no problem with like less than 2 divs invested into it. So it is a really cheap one to get going. You can switch into the build right at level 36 when you can equip Vixen's Entrapment, and your other unique items are also low level, so you'll be able to equip them as well. So you don't have to spend a lot of time playing something else. I just leveled as ED Contagion until 36 and did my first lab, and then switched into this build. Cruised all the way up through T16s and everything. This is the first time I've ever hit level 96 and 97 in a league. I was farming Guardian rotations, Shaper, Elder, doing the boss fights and everything, and just wasn't dying at all, so kept leveling. Really nice build in that regard, and this is also the first time I've ever unlocked every single Atlas passive point. Done all the Maven invitations, feared and everything, all really easy on this build. I'll leave you with the rest of this map, and then we will hop in game, and I'll go through as much of the details as the characters I can. Be sure to check the description for a path of building. I will try to leave some detailed notes and stuff in that as well to help you along, and probably throw in a little tree and gear set for that level 36 swap you can do as soon as you get there, so you can start playing the build right away. And then at the end of the video I'll throw in a couple of boss fight videos or Maven invitations or whatever. So I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Alright, welcome back guys. Here we are in game, and we will start going through everything that I can think of to tell you about this character. So, at the most fundamental level here, we are using Impending Doom as our main damage source. As it says, it supports Hex skills and causes them to trigger this secondary skill, Doom Blast, when the Hex ends, and it cannot support curse skills that are triggered or applied as an aura. So, what this means for us is that to trigger Impending Doom quickly, we need a way to apply the curse that it is linked to, which we obviously do just by casting, but more importantly, we then need a way to quickly remove it and reapply it, because it needs to be removed to trigger Impending Doom. Now, you cannot remove a curse by simply casting itself again. That will just refresh the duration and won't technically remove it, so it won't trigger a blast. Meaning you need to trigger other curses beyond your curse limit to remove the curse that is linked to Impending Doom to trigger it to blast. That is where the Gloves Vixen's Entrapment come in. It says trigger socketed curse spell. It's kind of a weird grammatical error there when you cast a curse with a 0.25 second cooldown. This actually will trigger all spells, all curse spells socketed in the Vixen's Entrapment, sort of simultaneously, but not really simultaneously. Any triggered gems in PoE, any triggered gems that you have linked in any triggered item, trigger in a specific order, even though to you visually it will appear that they trigger simultaneously. They actually follow the socket link order that you see in like a 6-link body armor here. So it goes top left, top right, and zigzags down to bottom right. And that order, regardless of whether the sockets are actually linked or not, is the same order in 4-socket items, but just truncated. So again, it goes top left, top right, bottom left. So before we go over the specific curses, what you need to know for this build is to get the loop to work with your Impending Doom proccing. You need to be casting / triggering one more curse than your curse limit. So in this case, we go for a curse limit of 4 curses. That happens with the 1 base curse, then we get 1 extra curse from Unholy Authority, bringing us to 2. We get a 3rd curse from Whispers of Doom, brings us to 3. We get a 4th from Vixen's Entrapment, because it gives +1 max, and we get a 5th from Windscream, which gives +1 max. Then we take 1 away using Replica Dweidri's Damning to bring us back to 4, and it gives a nice curse effect roll on the top end. So, we have 4 max curses, keep that in mind. What will happen here, as I right-click with Punishment, my cast speed is so fast now that it's hard to see, but technically the punishment will not apply to the enemies until the cast time of the punishment runs out, whereas Vixen's triggers the socketed spells as soon as you click, so all 4 of these curses are actually going to apply it before your punishment curse applies. And so, what we do to make our loop work is the first curse in Vixen's Entrapment here is Ellie Weakness. This is a throwaway curse that will constantly be being replaced in your loop and you don't care about. That's why we use Ellie Weakness, because it is one of the curses with a low mana cost among the ones that we aren't actually using. Any of these specific ones, like Conductivity and Flammability, actually have a higher mana cost than Elemental Weakness, so you want to use Elemental Weakness, or I think there's one other one that also has a low mana cost. This is a throwaway curse. It needs to be the first curse socketed in your Vixen's Entrapment. The next 3 are the permanent curses that we want to be on the mob all the time, because they're strong defensively and offensively. These are the ones that are sort of in the middle of our 5 curse loop. I'm using Enfeeble, Despair, and Temp Chains. Enfeeble, obviously, great defensively. With all our curse effect, it reduces enemy damage by a ton. Despair, gonna chop off a buttload of chaos resist with all of our curse effect, and Temp Chains is the one we're really focusing in with some of our enchants and stuff, because it is good both offensively and defensively, because it slows the mobs and it makes our poisons last longer. So then, the final curse is the one that we actually have linked to Impending Doom, which is Punishment. Punishment is obviously nice when the enemies get below half-life. They will take a bunch of increased damage on top of the Wither stacks that we'll also be generating. So what happens in the loop, we right click, and you may have noticed in the clear footage that to get something to pop, I actually have to cast twice. What happens is, we right click, before our punishment comes out, Elemental Weakness, then Enfeeble, Despair, and Temp Chains will be applied in that order to the mobs. That is our 4 curses that brings us up to our 4 curse limit. Then punishment will be applied. Because Elemental Weakness was the first one that was cast, it is the one that will be replaced by punishment. So the mob will have punishment, enfeeble, despair, and temp chains on it. Now, when we cast again, the second time, the first thing that will happen is Elemental Weakness will proc, which will remove punishment because it was now the last curse that was applied. That will proc our Impending Doom, and then again, it will be followed by Enfeeble, Despair, Temp Chains, and then Punishment will reapply, removing Elemental Weakness. So every time you cast, Elemental Weakness is going to replace Punishment, proccing Doom Blast, and then you'll end up with Enfeeble, Temp Chains, and Punishment back on the mob. So you can just cast over and over and over as fast as your cast rate goes, and you will proc that loop, removing Punishment and blocking Impending Doom on every cast after the first. Now, the other important thing you need to know for this loop is Vixen's Entrapment has a 0.25 second cooldown. Cooldowns in Path of Exile are not actually the stated numbers, because the server ticks at a rate of 33 milliseconds per tick, meaning all cooldowns are actually rounded up to the nearest multiple of 33 milliseconds. So in this case, that is 264 milliseconds, I believe. Check that math real quick here. Yes, 264 milliseconds is the actual cooldown rate of this. Cooldowns are never rounded down in your favor, they're only rounded up. So, if we take 1 second, which is 1000 divided by 264, we get a rate of 3.78. Now that is the maximum that your cast rate can be, or you will start overrunning the cooldown and wasting casts. So, on my character here, you can see I have the cast rate, where's my punishment? Tuned to 3.77. So that is 0.01 less than the maximum, so we're pretty much maxing it out. Now, if you were using a belt with cooldown reduction, you can actually lower this to the next breakpoint of 33 milliseconds, and then you could get a little more cast speed and squeeze out slightly more casts per second. I didn't bother with that. I don't think it's necessary. Now, achieving that cast speed is going to vary a bit depending on what you have. I happen to find a relic that just gives 12% cast speed that I'm using on this character. So that allowed me to come out of 5% cast speed that I originally had here and going into these life nodes, and then I just got this Vixen's Entrapment. You don't need this implicit, obviously, but it's a good thing to go for eventually and wasn't too expensive. And I got one with 14% cast speed after searching a bit on the trade site, because that's exactly what I needed to get to that just shy of 3.78 casts per second. So whatever you do, whatever you've got for relics, if you need to put in another passive point on the tree or get a higher or lower cast speed roll on your Vixen's Entrapment, just make sure you get as close to 3.78 as possible without overrunning it. And you can also adjust that a little bit by tuning your levels of haste, but of course you want that as high as it can be so that you have as much move speed as possible from it as well. So that's the important thing for the loop, our 5 curses, and making sure your cast speed matches. Now we'll just go through the other gem links. We've got Punishment linked to Impending Doom, Cruelty, Added Chaos Damage, Awakened Unbound Ailments. Obviously this can just be regular Unbound Ailments until you get the Awakened. And then Divergent Void Manipulation is very nice because that gives us our life sustain on boss fights and stuff beyond flasks, because it lets us leech chaos damage as life. One other important note here, don't use Awakened added chaos damage. You want regular added chaos damage, and the reason for that also ties into the fact that Impending Doom is a support gem rather than an active gem, even though it triggers a skill. Regular added chaos damage actually has more flat added chaos than Awakened added chaos. The trade-off is that Awakened added chaos gives +1 to the level of socketed gems, or +1 to the level of gems that it's linked to, but that only applies to active gems, so it won't work for Impending Doom, so you want the bigger flat amount that a regular added chaos gives. Now, back to the point that this is a support gem, and I realize this explanations are getting long-winded, but this is a relatively complex build. The fact that it's a support gem means global modifiers to spell gem levels, like +1 all chaos spell gems and +1 spell gems, don't work for it, because it is not an active skill gem, and those only apply to actives. So our weapon choice is a little different than you might expect. You actually need to go for a war staff rather than one of the staffs that can natively roll caster mods, because war staffs can roll the generic +1 level of socketed gems. This actually does apply to all gems, including support gems, so it's nice because it ups all of our supports in addition to Impending Doom, which is a support itself. So when you start out, you can get a really cheapo staff. My staff that I used for a long time only cost me like 10 chaos. I bought it. It had... what did it have? It was just a 6-link staff with fractured chaos dot multi, and I just harvest crafted a couple of chaos rolls until it hit +2 level of socketed chaos gems, which again, because it's level of socketed gems rather than all spell skill gems, does apply to our Impending Doom. And then I just crafted the % increased chaos on it. This staff I've got here, a little more complex crafting process and a little more expensive. For this one, I just camped for a while, found a staff, excuse me, that had +1 level of all socketed gems along with the chaos dot multi, and it had the fire res, and it actually had another worthless suffix that I didn't want. Managed to annul that off. Then, as you can see, I multi-modded it and crafted +2 level of socketed support gems with chaos damage. So that bought us an extra gem level over the previous one we were using. Then I harvest crafted the quality does not increase physical damage and grants AoE instead per quality. Then I beast corrupted it to 30% quality and then used tainted fusing orbs to 6-link it. So it ended up not being too expensive overall. Even this one was probably like sub 3 divines to craft, and it's really, really good. The absolute sort of optimal staff for this build would be a Cane of Kulamak with +3 level socketed support gems and chaos dot multi and chaos damage, but that's really expensive. There have only been a couple that have even shown up this league, and they cost a lot, whereas this is a lot cheaper, and you know, it's probably like 70% as strong as one of those Canes of Kulamak, and it's plenty fine for everything you're going to be doing with this build anyways. So that's the staff. We already went over the unique items for our curses. As far as our other rare items go, you're going to need a couple of decent spell suppression rolls in addition to the spell suppression on the tree to make sure that you cap out. For our auras, we are running Grace, Defiance Banner, Haste, and Divergent Herald of Agony. You do need the Divergent one to get up to 100% chance to poison. For a long time before I got the Divergent one, I was just running a chance to poison gem instead of added chaos damage as my 6th link there. Let's see. As far as the Enlighten goes, you actually only need a level 2 Enlighten. I just bought this one at level 2 Corrupted, and over the course of playing the character, it's leveled up to 3, but you actually only need the level 2 to fit in all of your reservations here. And then we've got a Flame Dash for mobility. This armor doesn't actually need to be 6-linked, it just needs to be 5-linked. This is actually the second body armor that I had on this character that I just inadvertently 6-linked while going for a 5-link, so that was nice. As far as your Eldritch Implicits on this, oh yeah, and of course, mention you want life resistances. Make sure you're capping your resistances, and % life and mana craft on there if you can. For the Implicits, I've gone for Malevolence, Aura Effect, and increased effect of your curses from Eldritch Currency. Up here on the helmet, I got pretty lucky crafting this thing. I just bought the base with the Temp Chains Curse effect. We did more Temp Chains Curse effect and effective non-damaging ailments, which we'll get to in a sec here, as our Eldritch Implicits. And then I just spammed some Orbs of Binding and Scours on it a couple times and hit this roll with the T1 life and the T1 spell suppress and a little bit of resistance, and then crafted on the increased duration of ailments while focused, which is a nice extra damage mod. The other couple rares we have on the build are really simple. Basically just life and resistances, and making sure you're capping your chaos resistance as well. You actually want to try and avoid mana rolls on gear. It's unfortunate that this hit mana, because since we are using Eldritch Battery, you actually want your mana pool to be as small as possible, which will let you use a higher level Divine Blessing with your Malevolence, because your energy shield pool will then be larger relative to your mana pool. So we can just use Malevolence as a temporary R, as you can see there, lasts around 10 seconds or so. We are also using a cast when damage taken steel skin, just a little bit extra survivability there, of course. And in the wind screams, we are using Wither, Creeping Frost, which again we'll get to, multiple totems, and spell totem. So I just dropped both of those totems. I make sure to drop the Creeping Frost one first, followed by the Wither, so that we end up with 1 Creeping Frost totem and 2 Wither totems. Now we'll go into the passive tree, and some of that other stuff will tie in. Couple unique jewels you definitely want on this build is you want to use Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame, wherever my Forbidden Flame is, to get Shaper of Winter from the Elementalist. As you can see, it makes it so all damage from hits can chill, and chills always reduce action speed by at least 15%, and can go up to 40%. So that is why we have the increased effect of non-damaging ailments here, and you also want to try and get some on this ring. That'll make it so you can get near that 40% chill on any boss in the game, and then on top of your temp chains, that means they are moving really, really slow, which is obviously excellent defensively. Also mention here, you definitely need the non-channeling skills minus mana cost on both of these, and then I recommend using Fertile Catalysts, as I have, to get those from -7 to -8. For the curses, you would think you would end up with a really high mana cost, since you're essentially triggering 5 curses constantly. And you do, however, the fact that your mana costs all come from 5 separate spells rather than one big costly spell means that these mods for reduced mana cost are essentially 5 times as effective as they would be. So each of these is actually giving -40 to our mana cost, so together they give -80 because they each apply 5 times since we're using 5 different spells. Next up, I have a Watcher's Eye here. Cheap Watcher's Eye, if you can find it. Unaffected by Enfeeble and Temp Chains because we are using Grace and Haste. The main reason this is important is because there is a rather annoying mod on rare mobs these days that reflects your curses back to you. And since our curses are super juiced up, we end up hitting ourselves with a really strong Enfeeble and Temp Chains if we curse mobs like that, which is no fun. That makes us really slow and makes us do little damage. There are a couple of other options you can go for here. There's a new jewel called Witchbane that makes it so when you kill a cursed enemy, you become immune to curses for the remaining duration on that curse. And then there is also the Balance of Terror jewel from the Sanctum boss that you can get with a couple of Despair mods that you would probably just use a second Despair curse in place of this, and it lets you proc Wither and makes you immune to curses. However, getting both of those mods together is quite expensive and would increase the total cost of this build by like 50%, so I don't think that's worth it. Plus, you wouldn't get the life and energy shield that you get from Watcher's Eye. So cheap Watcher's Eye here solves that curse reflection problem for the most part, in addition to using 30% reduced effective curses on you on the Pantheon, as well as one of my flasks has reduced effective curses on you, so that you are also not getting hit too hard by your Punishment and Enfeeble when they get reflected to you. Or your Despair, rather. So that covers most of the main points of the gearing and stuff. As far as the passive tree goes, I think it's sort of a fairly standard poison setup. We're grabbing chaos damage, life as we can, we're running Eldritch Battery, need our extra curse, we're grabbing effectively all of the curse effect we can reach. One other thing I mentioned is that for the anoint on your amulet, you definitely want Skittering Runes. That gives 50% AoE, Windscream gives 50% AoE, so that's how our curses cover like most of the screen. Gives us really good clear speed. and it gives another nice cost reduction there to make sure you can actually keep up with the cost of all of these curses in addition to your ring and amulet mods. So again, down through damage over time stuff, you definitely want this damage over time wheel. I realized kind of late into the build and moved some stuff around to be able to grab this so that you could grab the effective cruelty. This makes it so that I think you'll see in the videos, though some of the videos were using old gear before I actually switched this, but we can actually hit like the full 40% cruelty buff even on pinnacle bosses, so that's really strong. Our other rare jewel here is just life energy shield, and then another couple nice damage affixes. Grab the charisma wheel. More effective auras on you is real nice for our defense and offense with haste. We are getting... Oh, excuse me. I'm not cutting any of this. We are getting spell suppression here, spell suppression here, spell suppression here, and then as I said, with a couple decent rolls on gear, you can cap out your spell suppression. Grab life where we can, chance to poison stuff, all the chaos mastery. And then here, along with the Shaper of Winter things, we actually grab this little cold wheel that gives effect of cold ailments, which will make our chill stronger, and it gives us this one, Cold Mastery, that do enemies on chilling areas receive 15% curse effect. So that's why we use the Creeping Frost Totem, because it lays down a chilling area, and that gives us another 15% curse effect. So we're really doing everything we can to lean into the new curse effect with the curse reworks in this patch. For your Ascendancy, probably pretty obvious here, you're grabbing both of the curse things for explosions and the extra curse, and you're going down the chaos side and wither side. And up on this wheel, we're grabbing increased effect of withered. You get your wither stacks up really fast with your totems, and then the occultist passive is pretty much going to keep those stacked up throughout the fight. Pantheon. Grab the 100% chance to avoid being frozen mod here, and the cannot be stunned is nice against bosses, though having any energy shield gives you an inherent 50% chance to avoid being stunned. I happen to roll this while doing like the Merciless Lab, so there's some more chance to avoid being stunned. And then I think I've got some on my flask as well. So basically most of the time we're mapping, we're immune to being stunned, which is good because we don't have a very high life pool. So when something does hit us, there is a decent chance that it would have stunned us, but we have good stun avoidance to mitigate that. I think that pretty well covers it. Again, be sure to check the path of building, look through all the details there, and I will try to provide some useful notes in the notes section of that path of building as well, and an early swap tree and gear setup so that you can see what you would need to do to swap right at 36 into the build when you can use Vixen's Entrapment. Sorry this went on really long, but it's a relatively complex build, but I think it's probably my favorite build I've ever done, and probably the most successful build I've ever done, since I've essentially accomplished, well, not essentially, I've completely accomplished everything in the game other than the Uber fights. For the aforementioned reasons, this build is just not great for Uber fights. So thank you if you stuck around through all this, I appreciate it. Leave a like and subscribe and comment if you would, and hopefully I'll see you next time when I eventually put out another video. Thanks for watching, enjoy the boss fight videos, see you guys later.